conversations today and guide us as we walk through your scriptures. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So the kids downstairs, we've been walking through the Bible with them in this series of lessons, which incidentally is going to conclude pretty soon. I think the last Sunday of May is their last lesson, and then they're going to do kind of an end of the Bible, going through the whole Bible from cover to cover celebration, which Natalie's been planning with Lisa, and I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. Don't tell the kids, but Natalie talked to Brent, and I think they're going to be presented, each of them are going to be presented with an age-appropriate Bible as a gift for going through the whole Bible through that curriculum. So that's pretty neat. And I will say, too, like the benefits of going through the Bible are, as a family, are incredible. You can't replace that. And so we've been going through the Bible, reading through the Bible with our kids, and it's just really cool. Like we don't do kid devotionals and things like that. Like we're literally just reading through the Bible from cover to cover. And we read out loud, and at night we have our designated time, and we sit down and we drop everything, and we read the Bible. And I hate to admit it, but it's the first time as a family that we've done that. We've read our Bibles at bedtime with the kids, since they were really little, but we've never read cover to cover through the Bible as a family. And so I really encourage families to do that, whether you're doing that as spouses or, if you're living alone, do it by yourself. If you have kids or grandkids, do it with them. In some way, shape, or form, find a way to make it through the Bible in a year or 6 months, or I've done the 3-month cover to cover. I've done all kinds of different Bible plans, and my favorite pace is reading through the Bible in 6 months. For me, that's kind of the best, most beneficial pace, but with our family, obviously, we're not going to do that. We're going to take a year, but I encourage you to do that. So anyway, all that to say, once we wrap up, I'm going to go into June just a little bit, and then Brent's going to take over and do a study. I don't know what you're going to do a study on yet. Most of June. So at some point in June, we'll transition. So I'll hook you on some kind of juicy topic, and then I'll drop you like a rock, just so that you come back for more. But do you have a topic yet or no?
I was going to wait and see what the kids are doing.
Yeah. Okay.
No topic yet.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't know what they're doing either. I know they're doing some projects throughout the summer, I think, before they pick the next curriculum. So I don't know what that next curriculum will be. So just kind of thinking in the future, which is something I don't do well. I was telling Charles, Natalie and I woke up this morning, and neither of us knew what day it was, and I'm not even kidding. It took me about 10 minutes to orient myself and be like, what day? Because I woke up and there's this bright sun, and I'm like, oh no, I overslept. It's time to go to work. And I was like, wait, what work am I doing today? What day is it? And I was trying to figure that out, and then eventually I was like, oh, it's Sunday. I know, I got to sleep in today. This is fantastic. So today the kids are talking about love. And they're in first, 2nd, and 3rd John, but mostly 1st John. So we're going to talk about love, and I think I'll start this off by asking you guys, how do you define love, and what are some of the attributes? And how do you guys, what's your take on what love is? I know that's a loaded question. It's a very wide open general question, but how do you view love?
Love seems to be that never say you're sorry. Remember the old movie?
Love is saying that you're never sorry. I like this. I'm going to use that. When I'm sleeping out in the motorhome, I get kicked out.
not sorry, honey, at all.
I am not sorry. Tex told me that's what love is. What's love? How do you define it? Just generally.
I consider love as the interaction between people who care about each other.
Interaction, yeah. Interaction between two people.
Wanting what's best for someone.
Wanting what's best for someone. Ooh, yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, how we've twisted that one, huh? When I think about that, wanting what's best for someone, that encompasses so many different things. It encompasses setting an example for them. It encompasses discipline. It encompasses not just discipline as in reprimanding discipline, but just the discipline of habits and good habits. And I'll talk about this a little bit in the sermon, but I was always under the mindset that habits are really bad. You should never form habits. Habits lead to addictions and things like that. And I look at it now. I come from a family with a strong, long history of addictions. And I look at that, like we all have that personality. So I was a nail biter from a young child. And I'm a tapper. I tap, I'm just constantly, I talk with my hands. You guys can see it, genetically you can see that it's in my nature. And so I look at that and I'm like, well, that's not a bad thing. You don't try to stop addiction. You redirect that addictive personality and turn that into good habits. And so turn that into reading Scripture. Turn that into, harness it and use it for good. And we don't really think about those things. We're like, well, no, stop. I don't know if I don't think I showed the video here. Maybe on a Wednesday night I showed it. That's what it was. Remember the guy that was, I forget his name, but he was constantly tapping. He couldn't keep his hands still, and he was just always getting in trouble in school. And he got sent to the principal's office, and his teachers would get so mad because he was constantly, really disruptive. He was tapping, and he could not sit still. And so they said, sit on your hands. And so they would make him sit on his hands. Well, then he would tap his feet, and he couldn't help it. And so he had a teacher where they said, if you mess up during this class, you're done at this school. You'll be expelled from this school. So he's in class and he's nervous, and the anxiety's making him want to tap. And sure enough, he's sitting on his hands, and then he just starts tapping. And he can see his teacher, what he perceives as the teacher's just getting so mad. And then at the end of the class, he says, whatever the guy's name is, he's like, I need to talk to you after class. He's like, oh no, this is it. And his teacher said, you couldn't keep your hands and your feet still during my class. And he said, no, I can't stop. I can't quit doing it. I've tried, and I get in trouble, and that only makes it worse. It makes me more nervous, and I constantly have to be moving and tapping. And so the teacher said, have you ever considered taking up drums? And the kid was dumbfounded, and the teacher was like, I have something for you. He opens up his drawer, and he hands him a set of drumsticks. And the guy now is a world-renowned drummer, incredibly gifted drummer, and he's a motivational speaker, and he goes around all over the world and gives these talks. And I thought it was just really cool because, it's we're talking about love, right? Love doesn't just discipline people and say, well, sit still in church, because we're in God's house, right? And that's what you do. You sit still. It redirects people, right? There's still discipline, but you redirect people. So love is, it's kind of interesting. We've really twisted a lot of the definitions of love, and you look now at what's happening culturally, and you're almost dumbfounded because you're looking at you're like, wait, this is under this rubric of love, and tolerance, and people are the most irritable, intolerant, hateful, crazy, bizarre, like there's just so much weird stuff going on, and it's all in the name of love. And so we really have to define love biblically and define it well and talk about some of the attributes of love. So John does that. John's taking an ancient commandment and saying, a new commandment I give you. Love God and love your neighbor. And John's not being funny. He's not being silly. He's saying, I'm giving you this new commandment. Remember what love is, right? Remember that love is rooted in love for God and love for your neighbor. So here's some of the things that he says. Turn to 1 John. And we'll start in verse 3 of chapter 2. And by this we know that we've come to know him if we keep his commandments. Whoever says, I know him, but does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, in him truly the love of God is perfected. By this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. I don't want to give too much away about the sermon, but I hold in my hands here part of it. It's a 61 or 62-page report that was done in 1993. And this has held up through time. In fact, it's actually quite prophetic. This was written and researched by the Department of Justice, and the title of it is Family Life and Delinquency and Crime, a policymaker's guide to the literature. And it's talking about how the family environment sets the tone for where that child's going to wind up forever. That the dynamics in the home virtually can predict the future on what's going to happen with where these children wind up. Whether they wind up in jail, living out in the streets, whether they're successful in business, whether they're kind and respectful to other people. It's pretty clear. And so John's saying here, when you keep the commandments of God, the love of God is perfected. Whoever says that he abides or remains in God ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. In other words, you ought to look like Jesus, look like Christ in the way that we walk. And that doesn't mean, like, this is my soapbox. You guys should know this quite well by now. That doesn't mean like, oh, Jesus loved everyone and was super kind to everyone and like peace signs and VW bug buses driving around, like picking people up saying, hop in, it's the Jesus bus. All are welcome here. Like if you look at Jesus, he's at times so irritable and angry. And, you read the woe to you passages. It would be better for Sodom and Gomorrah than what's going to happen to you. Like, that's a pretty powerful statement. Jesus was blunt. He was offensive. I remember at one point the disciples said, Lord, do you not know that what you just said offended the Pharisees? And you know what Jesus' response was? I love his response to his disciples. Do you not know that you just offended the Pharisees? His answer, those whitewashed tombs. And then he just launches into this like angry speech. He didn't apologize. And the heart of the issue was they're not keeping my commandments. They're setting aside the commandments for their traditions. And they're mistreating people, and they're mistreating their parents. They say korban, but that's where the child had to take care of the parents, but instead they were like cashing out on their parents' inheritance and burning that all up, or they would spend their own money and say, oh, well, we spent this on all these other, on this tithing, and now we don't really have any money for taking care of our parents. And so it was like this loophole that they would find to not care for their parents in their old age. And so Jesus comes unhinged about that, because that's what love is. Keep God's commandments, do what's right always, do the next right thing, and keep God's commandments. So John goes on, still in chapter 2, starting in verse 9, whoever says he is in the light and hates his brother is still in darkness. Whoever loves his brother abides in the light, and in him there is no cause for stumbling. Whoever hates his brother is in the darkness and walks in the darkness and does not know where he's going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. Do you understand what he's saying? Like, if you have this hatred for someone who's your brother, you're walking in complete darkness. Put another way, Paul says, people who are deceivers are also self-deceived. He says that in 2 Timothy 13. Paul says they're both deceived and self-deceived. They deceive people, but they're also self-deceived. They think they're so good with God, and like, we've seen people like this. I talked about this a few weeks ago. It's kind of like the people who say, well, I'm not really religious, but I'm spiritual. Wait, what? Yeah, I like the Bible. I don't really read it, but I consider myself spiritual. I believe there's God. I believe in God, and I believe I'm going to heaven. I believe all my family's going to heaven. I've never picked up the Bible, but like, I'm spiritual. I think this is what Jesus is talking about, right? Like, no, you're walking in complete darkness if this is what you believe. Anybody who follows my commandments has perfected God's love. You ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. And that's one of the, I think one of the most basic things that we as Christians ought to teach our children. You want to know what love is? Walk like God walks. Paul says this repeatedly. Follow my example, ... What's the rest of that statement? Follow my example. Anybody know the rest of that? As I follow the example of Christ. Paul's not tooting his own horn. He's not saying, follow my example, because you know what? I went to 4 years of seminary. I'm the fill in the blank, whatever leadership position. Follow me because you're supposed to follow. Paul doesn't ever say that. Paul says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. That's what love is. Paul's perfecting God's love by keeping his commandments. Chapter 2, verse 15, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. I'm going to brag on one of my kids for a second, and I don't normally do this, at least not publicly. But I thought this was really cool yesterday, and we've commended Eden. Yesterday was Eden's birthday. She turned 13, and you hear all the stuff. Oh, you wait till your kid's a teenager. All hell's going to puke out on the ceiling. And I'm like, not really. So we were not afraid of her turning into a teenager and rebelling and setting the house on fire. We're just not afraid those things are going to happen. So she turns 13, and the day before her birthday, she said, Like we've been trying to get out of her, what do you want for your birthday? And she's like, nothing. I don't want anything. She's like, I just want to be together. Her gift that she wanted, which we're doing today after their baseball games, she wanted us to get all the family together out at Mom's and to have dinner together. That's what she wanted for her birthday. So Friday, she said, can I use my money and can I take the whole family to Dunkin' Donuts in the morning for my birthday? And we're like, absolutely. So we go to Dunkin', and she doesn't make a big deal about it. She just goes up and she pays for everybody. We all ordered. She pays for everybody. And then we're sitting down, and this gentleman comes up and he taps me on the shoulder. And he was like, I just wanted to thank you for blessing everybody in this place today. And he's like, your family, just the way you guys interact with each other, the way your kids talk to one another, the way they talk to you as parents. He's like, you guys you've blessed me, and you've blessed everybody in this place. And he's like, please know that your kids are good kids. And he walked away, and I was like, that's so cool. We teach these things. It's not accidental. It's not, oh, you got, like we've heard that before. You guys are so lucky that your kids are nice, because our kids, they just, our kids are just out of control. It's not luck. These things are taught, and the Bible's so clear about it that this is what love looks like. And it's not just our kids. I'm not saying I'm not bragging saying, well, my kids are, they have something special. Like I see it with other kids just here in this congregation. I see good parenting. I see great parenting. I see super respectful kids. I see giving kids. I look at what you guys are doing as a family, Brent. The way that they're just constantly, quietly serving people. The amount of meals that are made for people, quietly. The amount of meals that are made, the respect, the way kids talk to adults, blows my mind. And it's taught. That's not accidental, that's taught. These things are taught. And so I think we probably need to be a little bit more vocal as Christians without sounding like we're tooting our own horns, but tell people this stuff is not accidental. This is what love is. Love teaches people to be respectful and kind and to treat other people's property with respect and to treat other people with respect. And it's just so evident in the Gospel of John. John's saying, this is what love is, right? Follow God's commandments. Love God, love your neighbor. Walk the way God walked, follow his commandments. And anybody who's not living this way yet says he's a follower of God, you're a liar. I mean, that's a bold statement. Chapter 3, verse 16. We can all quote John 3:16. Can you quote 1 John 3:16? 1 John 3:16. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Didn't we just talk about this recently? I mean, was that last week that we talked about that, or the week before? James talks about that. By the way, Bob, I mentioned you in a sermon. It was the James passage, right? Faith without deeds is dead. It's useless. And James is specifically talking about feeding people and clothing people and giving water to people. People who are in need, you take care of them. And the famous statement, even the demons believe and they shudder. In other words, who cares if you say you believe in God? I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. James is saying, so what? And John is saying, so what? Listen again. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. He's not using hyperbole. He's not speaking metaphorically. He's being very literal. We ought to be willing to lay down our lives, to die for our fellow brothers and sisters. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. I mean, it's exactly what James was saying.
What's crazy about it is contrast that with the way most of the Christian world, what they teach and how they live.
Yeah. Love is most often equated with happiness, but happiness is like this really convoluted, there's like this fluidity now where nothing really has a definitive meaning. Define happiness. Well, whatever makes me feel good. Well, wait, there are lots of things that make me feel good for a while. Like McDonald's makes me feel good for a while. Then after a while, not so much. I mean, not to divulge too many details, but, some things feel good for a while. So defining happiness by what makes me feel good, well, feel good when? Like in the moment? Feel good for a month? I can guarantee you, any of us can, if things are going right in life, we can feel happy. We can be like skipping and dancing down the sidewalk. Have somebody you love be taken away from you in an instant, and watch what happens to that happiness. I mean, happiness can be stripped away in a second. So saying that, and you're 100% right. What's that? Yeah, I know. Yeah. I mean, after game 6, eventually you're just like, I'm not happy anymore. Was that their 6th loss in a row? Oh. I know, they are back to normal. Yeah, that's true. I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like, you're absolutely right. Like, we have this really weird Christianized definition of love that has really adopted the world's definition of happiness and love and tolerance and all this. And you're like, wait, like 15 years ago, the same people who were talking about love and happiness and kindness and all this, like, it was a completely different meaning. And it'll be a different meaning in another 15 years. It's so fluid and it moves around so much, and we're seeing that with all this identity stuff. It's just mass confusion. And so God, I think, is so crystal clear. You want to know what love is? You see somebody in need, you take care of them. You want to know what love is? You're willing to lay down your life for your fellow brothers and sisters. You want to know what love is? Walk in the commandments of God. You want to know what love is? Teach your children to be kind and respectful and to take care of other people. Take care of the earth. Take care of other people. To do the next right thing. To do what's right always. Teach your kids and your loved ones this, and you'll know what love is. You won't have to question it. You won't have to be, well, what is love? Anyway, I was going to read chapter 4. You guys can read on your own because we're out of time. Chapter 4, verses 7 to the end of the chapter, I think is so crystal clear on what God's love is. You can't walk away from this and be like, I wonder what love really is. You can't walk away from it and be confused. It's so black and white. So anyway, thank you guys for the comments. And we're out of time. And we'll see you guys in about 15 minutes or so.